Well, I can record these, and like I said, we can put them on Facebook, or we can share them if need be. It'll be easy to send to each other.
This is the best spot to be in with you
Yeah, it's
aiming right at me here.
no, it's aiming at me.
You can do that.
It was, I flipped it, but
Well, you can flip it back too.
Go back and forth.
I know. I know.
I'm going to continue a little bit on talking about the fruit of the Spirit. We've been talking about patience. We're almost done with patience. Be patient. We're almost done with patience. Talked about putting on patience. We have to put it on. We have to choose to put it on. It doesn't just happen because we wish for it. We have to choose to put on patience. It's in us. It's one of the many things by the Spirit of God that's in us. We have to choose to put it on. Just like you have to choose to put your clothes on this morning. We talked about being patient with people, especially. It's amazing how our ego and our pride can get us. We can always look at other people and think we know what they need. I tell you what, I just know that they just need me to tell them such and such, and I could really help them out if I could just tell them this or that or the other thing. We always think we've got the answer for other people, and a lot of times we don't see the stuff we need to do for ourselves. So we may have the answer, and there may be times that we do have the answer that somebody needs. They may not be ready to receive it. That's another area of patience we need to realize, because even when we have what other people need, God knows where their heart is. He knows when they're ready to receive it, and they may not be ready. The Lord may say, just no, not yet. I mean, how many times have you tried to help somebody? You had all the good intentions of the world, but they they didn't receive it. They actually got angry with you, and it made matters worse, and it was like it hurt your relationship because you tried to meddle in something that wasn't really for you to meddle in. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been there, done that. So we have to be willing to let the Lord guide us in these things and be patient and wait for the timing. Wait for the right timing. Because there is a timing for things. There was for us. There was a time in your life you wouldn't be listening to me. There's a time in life you wouldn't have wanted to listen to me when I was the way I was. But there's a time in your life you wouldn't have wanted to come to church and sit and listen to someone share things from the scriptures. You're like, I don't want anything to do with that. But God knew how to reach you. God knew how to reach your heart. He knew where you were, and He knew where you needed to be. One of the greatest ways to show love to others is to be patient with them. Patient with their weaknesses, their faults. Patient when they're slow. Patient when they're too fast. Whatever's going on with other people, people are going to be our primary source of irritation, annoyance, and opportunities to be impatient. So it's the way Joyce looks at it and looking at when she's talking about this stuff is, it's like a test. Every time we get a chance to be impatient, it's like a test. Are you going to pass it this time? Or are you going to have to keep retaking the same test? Now think about it that way, and it can help you a little bit, because God uses all the stuff, the good and the bad. He turns the evil for our good, but He's going to use that to teach us. How many times did you go through a really, really bad situation, and He saw you through it, but you learned a lot? I mean, you learned what you had to do, what you should not do. Hopefully you learned the ways that got you in the bad situation to avoid in the future. I mean, there's a lot of things like that that we learned the hard way, and we're a whole lot smarter for it. We know now, oh, don't do that again. One of my first part-time jobs when we first got married, I was working at a Goodyear store, Mountain Tires. I was working nights at UPS too. And every once in a while, when I didn't have tires to mount, the mechanic would ask me to help him with a pair of shocks or something. I understand a lot of the stuff. You know, I'm a farm boy enough that I understand a lot of mechanical stuff, but yet I wasn't old enough when we were still on the farm to really pick up all that stuff from my dad. So here we are. Mechanic says to me, could you take this old pair of shocks off this car? He's got it up on the hoist. He went to get the new shocks. I don't know what they're like now, but they always had a clip for the nut that held on. And so you put the power, you know, they had air tools. You put the power around there and you know, hit that thing and the clip wasn't holding the nut and it was just spinning. You know, you realize I'm like 20 years old at the time. Some reason I thought, if I jam my finger against that nut and then just hit the power just real easy, yeah, Greg made a face, just like a lot of guys that have used, hitting it real easy, went, whoo, and it just peeled my finger like a grape. You know, because that nut just took the skin right off. I know now not to do that. I learned that the hard way. I learned a lot of things the hard way. But, you know, I still, you know, I learned something out of that. It wasn't a great situation, but I learned something. I hurt myself again there. They ended up laying me off because I cut a finger all the way down to the bone and severed the tendon. I had to go have surgery on it. So I think they decided I was too much of a liability, so I ended up getting laid off after that one. But anyway. We got to learn to be patient with ourselves. Because, I mean, we make dumb mistakes. I use that example. It's like, you do stuff like that and you think, stupid, what was I thinking? And then you get down on yourself. It's like you do enough of that stuff, you just think, man, am I just a complete moron or what? It's like, they wouldn't even keep me on there because I wasn't smart enough to keep hurting myself. I was just a dumb kid. I didn't know how to do a lot of that stuff. What good does it do to get impatient? It's not going to change anything. Do we really think about that when we get impatient? If you're getting all upset with somebody, getting all impatient, say you're on a slow line at a checkout and the clerk is slow and doesn't seem to know what he or she is doing, you get all worked up, it makes it worse, especially for you. But it makes it worse for them too, because most of the time, if you've dealt with the public, you can tell when they're upset. You can see it all over their face. So now it makes the clerk probably more nervous, makes more mistakes, and it gets slower. Because now she screwed things up even more because she can see the faces of every one of you there in that line going, I wish they'd train these people so they know what they're doing so I can get out of here. We're not helping the situation. We have to be patient with people's different opinions. Ooh, that's a tough one nowadays. People are not always going to agree with us. Do we want to start World War III just because they don't see things the way we do? Is it worth it? You know, it's kind of amazing. I've done this for a while, and I can talk to somebody that has a totally opposite view of me on a certain subject, and I have heard enough of what they believe on that to make a comment here and there to just get them to just keep talking. And you know, they'll tell you what they believe. I mean, they'll really tell you what they believe if they think you agree with them. And it's amazing how much you can learn. Now, the key is, if you're willing to learn, a lot of times people you disagree with, they will have some good valid points. Now, you still may not agree with them, but you can kind of understand where they're coming from. And it may actually make you more effective when you do get the opportunity to share an opposing view with them. You're not going to come and slash and burn their crops and burn their barn down and kill their livestock and, leave them with nothing. I mean, that's the way a lot of people will approach an argument. Man, I want to just rip them apart and destroy them. Really? I mean, we can get so involved in wanting to win an argument, we lose the person. And that's the way a lot of the real staunch fundamental churches can be. And I grew up in one of those. Believe the Bible, bless God. And if you don't believe the Bible like I do, you're going to hell. Oh, that just really attracted people, didn't it? That was our witness. Our witness was letting them know what we don't do. I don't do this, and I don't do this, and I don't do that, bless God. And those of you that are doing that are all going to hell. Well, and they're just going to keep staying away from your church. Don't have anything to do with you. God did not call us to be judges. He's the judge. We're not. And yet, how many times religious people sit in their churches and judge all the people that aren't there? And then they're staying away in droves. I couldn't believe so many people that just kept coming back for that stuff. Yeah, Pastor, boy, you just really stepped on my toes. Give me some more of that. Religion will hold on to you to a certain extent. You somehow feel like you're doing your good deed to show God that you want to go to heaven because you went to church and you took your lumps. But God never told you to come take your lumps at church. This is supposed to be a family. I mean, do you really want to still go home? I mean, how many guys don't want to go home because they know their wife is just going to jump all over their case when they get home? If you got that kind of spouse to go home to, do you really look forward to going home? I see guys that spend their time out in the garage in the winter. They're out there watching TV in the garage. I'm thinking, is it that bad in there? Is she that hard to live with? I don't know. I always kind of wonder about that. And it's warmer in the house, but what's that proverb say? It's better to be in the corner of an attic than to be in the house with a bitter woman.
Dripping faucet.
Pardon?
Dripping faucet.
Yeah. Yeah. Be patient with people's personalities. I mean, some people, I've used this a lot. Colette will recognize this. It's like, boy, she had a personality like a wet dish rag. I mean, some people are just about as exciting as a wet dish rag. It's like, well, okay then. But some people are hard to get to know. Some people, if you give them a chance, they end up being completely different than what you thought they were. And I guess the advantage of what I did when I was in Brown, I kind of had to get along with everybody. Like Jim talked about, they paid me to be nice to people. So even the people that were the complete grade A jerks, you had to find a way to get along with them because, every one of them were your customer. So you had people like Jim and Mary Ann that you really loved to see, and then you had those other ones. And you had to find a way to get along with them. And yet some of them that you thought were just the worst people in the world, if you were nice to them, they kind of come around sometimes. Sometimes you find out, the boss that just seems like he's just the worst guy to deal with. Well, all of his employees are giving him a lot of crap, and everybody that comes in is giving him crap. He's the one responsible for it all, and he's just got a rough exterior. You get through that and you find out he's just a regular guy. You got to give people a chance. We have to be patient with somebody that tells you the same story for the third time. You've heard the whole thing again and again and again. It's like, you know what? If that makes him happy, listen. It's easy to try to say, yeah, you told me that, and they just keep on going and tell you the whole story again. Okay. No, Colette's dad, I like to use his as an example. He'd tell the same story, but it got bigger every time. So you had to look forward to it because you never knew how much he was going to stretch it the next time. So it's kind of fun. It's like, ooh, how big is that going to get this time? Or when somebody wants to tell you every detail, you don't really need every detail, you just need the basics. Or here's a good one: be patient when people interrupt you and you don't want to be interrupted. I kind of get going, and I think you guys know me well enough. Sometimes I can get on a rant of something and I want to finish my rant, and I don't really want to be interrupted. I've got to be patient with that. My sweetheart knows how to divert me on some of those. We can also show our love if we're in the middle of doing something we really enjoy, or we're just busy, we're really wrapped up in something, and maybe our spouse just really needs to tell us something, and we're like, not now, I'm busy. But they really are excited to tell you what they want to tell you. And we need to realize the way we can show our love is to just be willing to interrupt what we're doing and listen to them. I mean, being listened to is pretty important to people. A lot of us, we just don't really get listened to people will say hi. People will say, how's your day? But they keep on moving. They don't really want to know. I joked with a guy about that one time. We talked about how if you say, how you doing today? How's your day? Oh, good. And it's like, but most people really don't want to know how your day is. If you really tell them how your day is, they're like, oh boy, they're not going to ask you that again. So they didn't really want to know how your day was. And I told him that, we were joking about it. And so the next time he saw me, he says, good morning, how you doing? Not that I care. I mean, honestly, that's the approach that we kind of take. How you doing today? Just please don't tell me, certain people, you just kind of, instead of saying how you doing, you say good morning and you keep moving. If you're busy, you don't really have time for that because they are going to tell you how they're doing, the whole thing. But we need to be patient enough to listen to people, because a lot of times people just need us to hear them. I mean, really hear them, not just, what we want to hear. Be patient when they call you maybe too early in the morning. And, oh, I've been up for 2 hours. You just woke up, like my dad was a good one for that. He was always up way before dawn and just thought everybody else should be too, because he was an old farmer. So everybody gets up that early, right? If you're not, you should be. If you didn't get up as early as he did, you slept till practically noon. That's the way he always exaggerated it. Be patient when people want to goof around and joke around when you're trying to be serious. Sometimes I can be too serious, believe it or not. I like to joke around, I like to goof around, but sometimes when I'm serious, I'm too serious. I mean, my team at work, after I had to let somebody go, I was kind of need to tell my guys the things that we need to be careful about. I'm in the middle of it, and they just started ribbing each other, and next thing you know, they're joking and laughing with each other, and they're not even listening to me. I'm just kind of like, okay, and they're all good guys. They know to do their job, and I don't have to be concerned about them. So I just let it go, because what are you going to do? I know I can count on them, but they weren't taking me that seriously, because they know how to do their job. And so it's like, what am I going to do? Blow up at them and then cause a problem? Guys I can trust and count on, now they're like, geez, what's his problem? So you got to be patient with that. Be patient when people push in front of you in line, take a parking space that you thought you had. There's a lot of these things that are just everyday things, but we need to choose to be patient with people. Be patient when you don't feel good and people just seem to be clueless and don't seem to care. God makes everything beautiful in its time, not out of its time, in its time. you're in God's hands. It doesn't matter to you. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay, let me start that over. When you know you're in God's hands, it doesn't matter to you how long you have to wait. We get impatient because we think we should have what we need now. And we don't always have everything we want now. And we've talked about this. God knows the timing of when we're ready and when we're not. And we may think, hey, I'm ready. God's looking on the inside of you and he's going, no, you're not. And he's going to take care of it in the right time. It doesn't mean that everything has to take a long time, but we have to trust him. We have to trust his timing because he knows the whole picture. You know, it's just all about me. It's all my life. God, me. Well, God's looking at me and you and you and you and you and everybody out there, and he's got the whole picture. If God does shorten the time, it will be because you have put yourself totally in his hands and said, Lord, anytime you decide is fine with me. I love you. I'm just going to keep enjoying myself until you bring forth what you know is best for me in its time. That's a trust that we have to develop. And that trust will help us be more patient than just trying to make ourselves be patient, trying to make ourselves be nice to people. If we learn to trust God first and to be patient with ourselves and with God first, it's easier to be patient with other people. Because now, if we start trying to look more at his perspective, now instead of looking at that slow clerk that could annoy us and make us angry, look at their perspective. They got 6 people in line and they're the only register open. And we may think that stupid company ought to open more registers because there's 25 of them. But that's not her fault. She's doing the best she can, and maybe she's new. Maybe it's her second day or first day. Maybe we could be the one person that's nice to her that day, that doesn't treat her like garbage because she took 5 minutes longer than I had to wait. Well, aren't you important? Is your 5 minutes more important than anybody else's? I mean, you know, if we look at it in a perspective of realizing sometimes we think we're so important, they made me wait. Well, who the heck are you? I mean, in comparison to everybody else, do we make ourselves so much more important than anybody else that our time is more valuable than anybody else's? You know, you go to a doctor's office, the doctor's the one in charge, and he'll make you wait. You may wait for an hour to go see that doctor. And most people aren't real happy about that. But if you want to see that doctor, you'll wait. And everybody else in that waiting room will wait too. I read a funny one the other day. There was an old gentleman in a doctor's office, and everybody was getting impatient. The doctor was running way behind. After being in there for 2 hours, he stood up and he started walking slowly to the door, and everybody watched him. And he turned and he looked at everybody and he goes, I guess I'll just go home and die a natural death. It's an extreme that I just found amusing because we're all thinking it's like it's going to take forever. Heck, might as well just go home. I don't know. If you realize there's a lot of fruit of the Spirit, and I didn't do this in order. One of them is faithfulness. And I had to check in my spirit to even get into that one back when I first started this. And I was like, it just didn't seem like it was going to come across really well, and I had to get the right mindset on it. And as I've gone through this, I realized the things that she says about faithfulness in here are things that, well, frankly, you're all good at. You're just such a good, faithful bunch. So there's things in here that I could say and you'd be like, yeah, got that. Like, I mean, because that's one of the things we've got here is faithfulness. After everything this church has gone through, we've got faithful people. So I couldn't come at faithfulness with the attitude of, you got to work on faithfulness. How can I preach faithfulness to people that are faithful? A faithful person knows what God has put in their heart, and even though many times they feel like quitting, they don't give up. They don't leave a place because they want to leave, or a job because they don't want to be there anymore. They don't get out of a relationship because they don't want to bother with certain things in it anymore. A faithful person is committed to doing whatever God tells them to do, no matter what it costs them personally. And it's like, that's describing this bunch. You're faithful people. The way we grow is to stick with something. That's why we have the advantage of having grown in so many things here, because when so many other people decided that they'd had enough, we stayed. We're faithful people. It's important. So he's put that seed of that fruit of faithfulness on the inside of us. And that's something that we've exercised here. Being faithful, not just to be here, but to continue and to stick with it. To not give up on where you are or what you need to learn, what we need to do as a church. There were several really good things on that, but it's like I just, like, didn't need to go there. Because that's one of those things, again, that we all know people that need it. We all know people that probably should still be here. But that's between them and God. We can't decide for them. We can decide for us. We can decide what we need to do, and we can stick with what we need to do. But she said something in here I thought that was interesting. Many people in the body of Christ are trying to find their way, but have never stayed in one place long enough to find it. Remember in the early days when everybody was all excited and everything, but they always wanted to go and do something. And it was like, Randall talked about this, and I don't think I wanted to hear this for a long time. We need to love God enough to be willing to go where he wants us to go, but we also need to love God enough to stay where he wants us to stay. And I think a lot of us had to learn that. We had to be willing to stay. You know, I was always afraid God was going to send me to Africa. I've joked about that with false grouse. I didn't want to commit because, man, you're going to send me to Africa. I don't want to go to Africa. But you know what? A lot of times I didn't want to stay either. I wanted to go forth somewhere, and God wanted me to stay. A lot of people in our society don't have loyalty and commitment. They miss out on a lot. I mean, how many, you see the Hollywood style, you know, not just the Hollywood people, but people that live with their romantic ideas from Hollywood. And they don't stay in a relationship long enough to get the advantage of a long-term relationship. They bail too quick. And if you get people to be honest with you, I talked with a guy one time, he was on his third marriage, and he said he finally realized the things that he'd been doing wrong, the things he needed to change to make his marriage work. I mean, we have to put ourselves into it, and we have to be willing to do what it takes. And some people it takes a while. But God remains faithful even when we are faithless. That's one of the thoughts in there that always sticks with me. God is faithful even when we're not. It doesn't change him. God doesn't say, well, you weren't faithful, so heck with you. No, he stays faithful. He's steady. So we get off the track, like I was talking about, on the wrong trail somewhere. God didn't just go off and do something else and, well, good luck, hope you live. No, he's still there with us. He's still helping, trying to guide us back where we need to be. He doesn't leave us. Even if we feel like he did, he didn't. Your feelings have nothing to do with what God's doing. I mean, example, in your younger years of marriage, he or she doesn't do something you want them to do, and you feel like they don't love you. Did they quit loving you? Or were you just going by your feelings because you were immature and not willing to say, you know what, I had expectations for this, but they weren't thinking along with that. They probably don't even know I was expecting that, but my feelings got hurt, so she just don't love me. And I had to take hold of myself at times like that and say, you know what, she does love me, I know she loves me, and I need to quit acting like a spoiled little brat and just have confidence that my wife loves me, even if I didn't get my way. We do that with God. Well, I didn't get what I prayed for. Doesn't God love me? You may have just not been ready for it. Obviously, if you're acting like that, you're probably too immature to, be at the point where you needed to be for that. But, we learned those things early on. And we have to continue to do that in relationships, to not let our feelings run us off the sidetrack, away from where we know we ought to be just because we feel a certain way. Because your feelings are not a good guide. The Holy Spirit is a good guide, not your feelings. Since hopefully I put this in the right perspective so you know that this is just going on with the thoughts. Many people simply need to grow up instead of being quitters and running away every time someone corrects them or they don't like the way things are going. Otherwise, they won't have what it takes to be what God needs them to be. See, that's the fruit that we get by being faithful, sticking with a marriage, sticking with a church, sticking with, a job that maybe, like I tried to quit the job I have now several times. I did. The boss I had she was so unpredictable. She would love on you one day and jump all over you the next. I couldn't figure out what to do with her. And after the third time of her jumping all over me about something that was just ridiculous, I just said, that's it. I started looking for a job. Every time I found something I could do, I could tell in my heart, no. I'd find something else. No. I even drove to these places and I'd drive in and no. I just knew in my heart, no. I was like, after about the sixth one, I was like, okay, obviously I'm not supposed to leave. And then she quit and I got her job. Okay, I didn't know that was coming. But see, if I'd have quit, I would have missed out on the opportunity I got after that. So a lot of times we have to be willing to go through the tough stuff to get to the other side of it, because God knows what's on the other side of it. We don't. If you're faithful over little things, God will make you ruler over much. That's a scripture that we can go all over the place on that one. But that scripture does illustrate some things in that area that we have to remember. Because there's little things we do have to be faithful in. And there's a lot of areas, whether it's your finances, whether it's your relationships in your family, your church, we have to be faithful in all those little things so that then when God needs us in a bigger area, we've already shown we can be faithful. We've already shown you can trust my word. If I say I'll do it, I'll do it. If you trust me with a certain amount of money, I'm not gonna like, ooh, I got a little here, a little for me, a little for, you can trust me with it. if you need something done, you don't have to be there looking over my shoulder. If I say I'm going to do it, I'll do it. I've, regardless of a lot of the things I've told about my work history, the one thing that I've always been told, even when I'm still dealing with a lot of the anger of the way the company treated me, I always had managers tell me, I don't worry about you because I know I can count on you. They always knew I could be out there till 9 o'clock at night. They'd go home and go, the old days, they'd stay there, and they would stay until the last driver was in. And certain ones, they will stay there because they know that there could be trouble. If I was out late, my manager always told me, I don't worry about you. He'd go home, be with his wife. He didn't wait up for me. Now, I was a little grumpy at the fact that he got to go home and I was still working late, but he always knew he could count on me to get it done. And that's the kind of faithfulness that is great to see, that we have developed here. The kind of faithfulness that sticks with it, that gets things done, that you can count on. So I'm ending that because I didn't have a lot left on the patience part. But you know, the patience dovetails on that. There is a faithfulness connection to that. And if we will be patient, and it does start with us. And there's another area that I'll get into is in the next part. But we have to do this personally first before we do it with other people.